the thrust of this one-day summit in Abuja. President Bola Tinubu is represented by Vice President Kashim Shettima at the event, which has dignitaries from all walks of life, including former President Olusegun Obasanjo.
I bring you warm greetings from...
Between 2019 and 2023, Africa has witnessed at least 11 coups, and this wave of military putches raises the question of how well Africa has fared with democracy.
These challenges or failures manifest in the inability to promote credible elections, inclusiveness, improved prosperity, and meaningful transformation and stability on the continent.
Today, the people of West Africa paint a clear picture of a gathering crisis. Strong men and authoritarian governments are gaining power, and civilian rulers, civil society leaders, and human rights advocates are being silenced as they sound the alarm.
For former President Obasanjo, democracy will be effective if built on good leadership, strong institutions, the rule of law, and people-centered governance.
Hope is the oxygen of democracy. And if you lose hope, then your democracy is dying. And what we find is that our youth particularly are losing hope and interest in democracy. And we have to do something about that.
He calls for a contextual democracy that addresses the peculiarities of Africans.
The rethinking of liberal democracy should be focused on Africanizing a universal political system based on African realities and peculiarities. The context and the content must be interrogated suitably and appropriately placed to serve our purpose.
President Bola Tinubu, speaking through his vice, says democracy is better than the military rule, as he advocates the revitalization of regional communities in Africa to bolster trade and integration.
Today we have recorded 25 years of unbroken democratic governance. We have learned through bitter experience that the cure for bad democratic governance is more democracy. As one of our most profound intellectuals, the late Professor Claude Ake, once famously opined that people must learn to become their own political messiahs from bad governance. This can only be done through the instrumentality of democracy.
The takeaway from this summit is that for democracy to have impact in Africa, and Nigeria in particular, leaders must emerge through a free, fair, and credible election that reflects the people's will. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
Okay, so that is what we're going to be talking about right now. We've got a professor of creative writing in the University of Abuja. He's also a former presidential aide to the former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, who you heard there. He's also an author, Dr. Tunde Olushunle. Good morning. Thank you for coming.
Good morning. Good to be here again.
So,
good morning.
You know, a lot in terms of, if you look at all the key issues that were highlighted there, the peculiarities to Africa, significance, democracy, what does it mean to us? And from the way it seems to be playing out, question marks. So those suggestions that they have given, how do you internalize it, for instance?
Thank you very much. Good to be here again. Largely what we have done in Africa is to adopt the kind of democracy that is not domesticated, which doesn't carry the essential African flavor. Presidents in Africa, for instance, in most instances, operate under a constitution that makes them virtual demigods. They're so all-powerful, they have the power to hire and fire. We've had instances of, roughening up between presidents and their deputies, for instance. We've had, issues of funding, issues of cost of governance by the kind of governance template that we operate. Our democracy is 25 years. And it is very important that we're having this kind of conversation. One of my most recent articles was titled Wanted in an emergency summit on the cost of governance. And I was looking back, and trying to see how, for instance, the cost of governance today has ballooned the way it has. When we came in 1999, I remember very clearly that at the level of special assistants and aides to ministers that were appointed, there was actually an attempt by the civil service, the bureaucracy itself, to help fill those positions. But you see, the political class thought it differently and said they should be given, some legroom to make some of the appointments. But, President Obasanjo reduced the numbers to 2. Now, but if you look at today, 25 years after, there's been this wholesale ballooning of the system. I was looking at the papers the other day, and I checked, one of the head of one of the arms of government in his own office has about 68. He has special advisors, he has senior special assistants and special assistants, 60 of them. All of these people have to be paid. They have to run their own families. They have schedules which they also have to fund and all that. If you now apply this to what happens elsewhere too, it is almost a global phenomenon across the continent. We woke up on Sunday, for instance, to learn about the attempted coup in the DRC. And if you look at the undercurrents, you see the leader in Nigeria's kind of democracy, in the African style of democracy, is so all-powerful. Same for the governor. We have officials who don't think they are accountable to anybody. They get there, and they just run on their steam. Of course, the story about the former Kogi State governor is there, where you have a governor who, from his seat there, was, transferring money in foreign exchange to a school for some of his children who probably were not yet born. So, it is this kind of, how do you put it now, this kind of over-muscular democracy, in Africa, which we have to look at and redress.
But, when you talk about this African flavor and the way the whole thing goes, you just tend to ask yourself, look, for instance, one of the dailies today, Professor Mahmoud was talking about the state independent electoral commissions, how on the eve of elections, they put up that commission, and after that, they disband it. So, is this the African flavor that they were talking about?
I think this is actually the abuse. I saw that report as well. And what is happening at the state levels with these state independent electoral commissions is just a situation where you have no election. And names are just written. I have served at the level of the state before. In my state, Kogi State, I worked with 3 governors. The late Abubakar Audu, far back in 1992, Colonel Paul Omeru, and the late Colonel Zigula Safakria. So, I know a bit about what happens there and the powers that governors also command. You see, what we are having, therefore, is totally wrong application. And that is where, again, when people oppose the suggestion about state police, it is because of reasons like this. African here, which I'm talking about, is the kind of situation where we try to accommodate our peculiarities. I don't know, for instance, why it isn't possible for us to run a unicameral National Assembly. 109 senators, 360 members of the House of Representatives. You check what it takes to keep them there. And then, you look at where workers are advocating new minimum wage to be able to survive. I filled my car just on my way here. Cost me about 70,000 naira, so we can go on and go on. When we, talking about the advocacy for African style, it is not an invitation to chaos or anarchy in government. It is something about being realistic, about, what can work for us, especially from the point of view, of overpopulating the political space and, eating too much of what will actually be deployed for development.
Because we actually need to be careful when we're considering some of these things. We've seen countries in this same Africa that the leaders want to sit tight. We've seen how the war broke out there. They've retrogressed for decades. It's a global village. So if those principles, because I mean, you want to play on that global stage. You want businesses, you want your economy, you want your country to thrive. So if those principles are not there because of some of these things that people do, how do we expect to be relevant in the global village? So when we talk about those peculiarities to us, are we juxtaposing them against those global best practices, as it were?
Well, yes, we are not there yet. But even in Africa here, there are probably models that we can speak of.
Okay.
I'm looking back now at the scenario in Kenya. It hasn't been as bad as we have here. Yes, Paul Kagame has ensured relative stability in his country, is that Rwanda. But again, he's gravitating towards Sithitism, perfected by people like Teodoro Obiang Nguema of Equatorial Guinea, or Yoweri Museveni, who's been there for 36, 37 years. Now, in some instances, these are not the kind of examples that we are looking for. But I believe that out of 51, 52 countries that we are here in Africa, there are samples that will probably fit, this kind of mold that we're talking about. It's a new campaign, so to say. So voices have to join this. Beyond whatever was said yesterday, we should be talking about this at the level of university faculties, forthcoming conferences, and so on and so forth. And let's see what we're able to put together, that suits us and suits our people, and also enables us to be able to, operate in the global village.
That framework for what an African-style democracy is, or what a Nigerian-style democracy is, I think many Nigerians will agree that we cannot continue with the model that we're in right now. But the framework for what ours is going to be is what is giving people a little bit of concern. Because if you're going to tailor a democratic style to the people and their story and their history, that takes time. You mentioned Paul Kagame and Rwanda. I'll give you an example of something that happens in Rwanda. There is no such thing as a tribe. If you're filling out any form, you cannot. There's no place for you to state what tribe you are from. And the reason is because of their history and that war, and the genocide against the Tutsi by the Hutu. So the idea that they've created, and in every civil service you enter, every office in the civil service, there's always this pillar that has the names of everybody from that office that was killed during the genocide. It's in every office. I remember asking one time, do you protest here? And they said they laughed, actually. Said things like that don't happen here. If you have an issue, you go to the courts. We don't litter our streets. We don't let people protest on the road. Not because we're anti-democratic, but because we are trying to build a country. If Nigeria is going to create one that is tailored to our history and our experience, what? Maybe 3 things that you think it should have that would say this makes this democracy Nigerian.
Principally, we have to take another look at the 1999 Constitution under which we are operating. And, look at those things that are not working for us. So long as we continue to operate that very deficient, very faulty, very skewed Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, these issues will be difficult, for us to attain. It will be difficult for us to maintain, the kind of security that we envisage, for instance. It will be difficult for us to ensure that the dividends of democracy permeate where they are. When you have a situation where a minister can sit on his desk and write off billions in the name of palliatives to the people on the street or the grassroots, but this money doesn't get to them, we have to look at those instruments which empower them or which they are abusing to deny the rest of us and ensure the kind of dysfunctionality that, that prevails in our country today.
But if certain things have got to happen, continuing in this narrative too, some of the things that happen here, I mean, it's difficult to agree on some things. I remember when they had that conference, I think they almost agreed on everything, except the resource control bit.
Are you talking about the national conference?
National conference.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that bit, and you see several other narratives. So I don't know if we could even get to that point where you don't put state of origin in this
Absolutely.
country. And then the question about...
And religion.
And religion.
Yeah,
And then the question about our history, in
Sure.
fact. Do we even talk to ourselves about our history? Many don't know.
Is the history taught in the schools?
So these
How
are
much, does the successor generation even know about our history? When you tell children, for instance, oh, this, and actually, if you tell some people the story of Nigerian democracy at 25, some people probably forgot some of the things that transpired under Obasanjo, under Yar'Adua, under Jonathan. They look so recessed in the people's minds now that they may not be able to piece it together. You see, so it's an entire gamut of our society that needs, sanitation at that level. You talked about the national conference and, the fact that the issue of resource control, fine. And, you also find, some all these subtle advocates of, we want to do it our way. Some are pretending to want to go. And, people are also fighting for, a return to the regional model of government. And of course, they cite examples, with how well the Southwest fared, how well the Southeast fared. They remind us about stories of how, the granite pyramids impacted, the northern economy at some point in time. So, everybody has his own pluses, for what they probably envision. But as I said, we still have to come back, review that 2014 report of the National Conference and see, what to adapt from there.
I mean, before we move on, I think what I'm picking from this conversation is that we're trying to find out what makes us Nigerian. What are the tenets?
What's our identity?
What is our identity?
Sure.
Who is the Nigerian?
Sure.
The National Orientation Agency, they say they're coming up with some value charter real soon. There was something he talked about called the duty of care, which he said is inherent. It's inherent in our laws. It's something that every Nigerian should carry, the duty of care. What does that mean? It means if I feel like you're in trouble, I'm supposed to help you.
Sure.
And it's part of what our identity is. But the concerted effort to drum this identity into us so that we know what we mean. Because the way we're carrying on is like anywhere belief is.
We have to go.
Whatever works for us is what we even in our democracy, whatever works.
We have to go back to even our family values. There were things that were inculcated in us when we were growing up. I was born in Kaduna. And I remember that whenever I came back from school then, I ran around with even people at my age then who were attending, Quranic classes. It didn't make a difference.
Yes.
Meanwhile, I was in Our Ladies Primary School, and my parents are Christian. I did my secondary school, I completed primary school in Benin City and attended secondary school in Benin, all through. And, when the late Professor Ambrose Ali was paying for the WAEC fees of my set, nobody asked me where I was from. We have to get back to that Nigerian along the lines that you said. In the past, maybe in the recent past, you're driving, you could even be on the highway. The car in front of you skids, goes into the bush. You are so concerned. You stop, you park your car, and you want to help. But what do we do these days? When that is happening, we take our phones.
To film.
We begin to film. We are not offering any immediate support or succor to these people. We are all interested in being freak reporters, telling people about this just happening here. And so what have you done, to help mitigate that situation? I've had to release a vehicle, traveling between here and my state. I had an incident. I had to release a vehicle, because we're going in about 2 or 3 vehicles. I said, take these people to the next available hospital. Hold some money. When you finish that, call us and know where we are so you can join up. We need to go back to that. Ayo.
Chamberlain. So, you know, we had this conversation with Dr. Samadiemi about talking about leadership in Africa. I think it was late last year or early this year. Chamberlain will remember. And he was talking about something similar to what we are discussing now. But he said that we have a challenge that we need to face, and that is that of culture. The system of government we ran before colonialism was monarchical. The system of government that we tried to superimpose on monarchy is a democracy, parliamentarian style. The one we are practicing now is still superimposed on monarchy. However, our colonial masters did not superimpose monarchy on the democracy on monarchy. Rather, they put monarchy under the democracy under the monarchy. So I'm wondering, do you think it's a problem of the style of government, or it's about us, the people, how we internalize whatever system of government we're running?
Thank you very much, Ayo. I think it's a two-pronged narrative here. We are probably also culpable. And, you know, some of the laws under which we run are also culpable. I mean, when we have reduced everything that happens to, you know, advising people to go to court, for instance, when we cannot sit down to actually look at the brass tacks, when a person who tells you go to court knows that he can actually move to a particular level and impede, you know, the flow of justice. So that's why I say the problem is partially ours, and the problem is also partially that of the laws. It could have been theatrical, but I saw this video clip trending at some point about people in a particular country swearing to their own oath of allegiance by wearing a python around their necks. And people are saying that, you know, we should henceforth traditionalize our oaths so that, you know, we can be taken more seriously. So like I said, you know, in my earlier response, we have a problem. We need to, that has to be exercised. And, you know, the template, the manual we are operating is also deficient. Kayla talked about the National Orientation Agency the other time, and, you know, how they want to come up with something. There have always been programs organized by the National Orientation Agency and, you know, similar bodies trying to help us, you know, to achieve a national reorientation. I remember when we came in 1999, the orientation arm of the Ministry of Information and Culture was excised and taken under the presidency. A special advisor was appointed, and part of the mandate was to lead a campaign for national rebirth. I was part of that exercise. Chief Onyema Ogochukwu, a very senior colleague, was the special advisor at the time. And we took the campaign to the states, trying to bring elected and appointed public officers to face their people and tell them how they were working for them. And I'm talking here about 25 years ago. We are here again 25 years after, we are still groping in the dark. So that's why I say it's partly our problem, it is partly also our laws, which ensure that somebody, you know, disenfranchises me, steals what belongs to me. He's seen to have done that, and I'm still referred to go and resolve it in the law court.
You know, Dr. Lusunle, I'm not sure that we have actually addressed the real issues here. We're talking about a democracy. It's a system of government, it's a form of government, it's a way that people selected to govern themselves. But the times when we had monarchies, there were little frictions. Everyone generally just fell in line. Yes, people misused or took advantage of the systems. Then we had military rule. we had autocratic rule at the time, and it would seem like people still fell in line. It only depends on whoever was in office at any particular time. But now we say there is seemingly no absolute power resident in one person. The president can't just wake up in the morning, or the governor can't just even wake up in the morning and say, you know, the National Assembly does not exist, or the State House of Assembly does not exist, even though we have an idea what happens in the states. So it's back to the same question. If we are saying we have a problem with our democracy, what has happened? What has worked for us before?
Let me intervene now. I didn't want to begin here by celebrating, you know, the military form of government. As director of press to Colonel Paul Omero, military administrator in Kogi State, for instance, I remember that the cabinet was a trim cabinet of 9 commissioners. The 9 commissioners, you know, were chosen at 3 per senatorial zone. You know, that was the kind of regimen that was put there, but it was a military government. If you look at our staffing, those of us who were principal officers serving the military administrator, all the ethnicities in modern-day Kogi State were there. I'm Yoruba. The director of protocol was from a different zone. The chief physician to the governor was from a different zone, and these things were purposely, you know, put in place to ensure that the different parts of the state could have a sense of belonging. Sometimes we want to write off the military and say that, you know, they brought so much, you know, ill wind, you know, underperformed, and so on and so forth. You know, that's why I told you, you know, I don't want to celebrate. But there are actually things to take away from there. Coming, you know, to the other part of the question, the point is that as we speak, our kind of democracy is subject to gross abuse. And our people are taking it, you know, they are shredding it in every turn. It's like, you know, we're in some kind of freestyle milieu where you are probably at liberty to do what you think you want to do.
So it goes back to the question, Dr. Luxule. My sincere apologies. It goes back to the same question. Now we have identified, you have identified some things, the elements that worked for us before. There are elements that worked for us in that time. There are elements that worked for us when we had a monarchy in place in our country. Is there a way, talking about a homegrown democracy, is there a way we can pull some of these elements? In Europe, they had monarchies before they began to go in the direction of democracy. In Britain, in the United Kingdom, they still have a monarchy, but they operate democratically largely. What are elements to borrow from those areas that we can fuse together to form whatever it is that we want to call our own homegrown democracy? That's the question that I think we should be asking. This conversation about our homegrown democracy has been going on for way too long, Dr. Luxule.
Yeah, well, comes back to what I said. We still have to sit down and look at the issues. You know, we can only pontificate here and also, you know, make proposals. At the end of the day, we still have to come to the, you know, to the round table and see how the system works for us. Not just because we are, you know, in the capital, as it were, but, you know, down the way to our people. We here now will not be able to say, I mean, I like the background you gave about, you know, the monarchy and all that, you know, but unfortunately we are in a different milieu now. So I don't really know, you know, what we could say, we want to pick specifically, say from Britain and all that. We have to come back, come to the table and talk about this. It is beyond, you know, pontification. We have to sit at a round table. An opportunity like this, which is the first anniversary of the incumbent administration, will actually open that kind of window. Let's talk.
I think it's a conversation that has to be had. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo has been saying this for a while. Almost at every forum, maybe in the past 2 or 3 years, I've been hearing him say it. We need to get over this Western-style democracy that we're doing here and get something homegrown.
Adaptable.
Something that adapts to our person and our culture and our story. But you see, that's where the issue is. That's where the divide suddenly comes up.
Yeah.
Who are we? What do we stand for? What are our values? And we have spent so many years just surviving and not actually building a character, building a nation that stands for something. I think around the world, maybe the one positive thing that you can say about a Nigerian is that they have swag. You know, if a Nigerian comes into the place, you will know because we have swag. But that's not enough.
I know they're brilliant.
They were brilliant, where we make the best of every situation. But these are things that have to now be curated, not so? They have to now become part of our identity.
Absolutely, yeah. And you see, it's going to be, we have to begin something that grows over time. You know, if perhaps we had laid some of these things out 25 years ago, when we're optimistic that democracy will grow, we should have started, you know, things like this. I like you talked about swag, you talked about, you know, brilliance, you know, and brilliance, by the way, is not monodirectional. Yeah. We do well in virtually everything.
Oh, yeah.
In sports, in academics, you know, and all that. We just, you know, we excel. So, you know, that's why I'm saying we need that kind of social re-engineering, you know, so that our country does not continue, you know, to just float and gravitate aimlessly, you know. That is what I think we should be doing now.
In fact, yesterday, even up until this morning, I got calls. People say, well, you guys have to thumb up Ademola Lookman because of what he did at Europa League. So that's a rallying point.
Absolutely.
So we can actually have some of these scenarios. People are looking for connections.
Absolutely.
What do they need something?
Yeah, what do you go to?
Why do you think that we don't seem to have this conversation, or something is not starting as it ought to?
Looks like our mentality has been skewed, you know, sadly, because of the kind of, in a way, because of the style of some of people that have, you know, administered this country. The last administration, for instance, you will hear people murmur in the background that, this Buhari doesn't seem to be the one we knew when he was a military man. For me, he was a very convenient monarch who was confined to the comfort of the State House and who just allowed the people around him to run wild. You know, the kind of things that some people did to this country. Under the military dispensation, we used to know, you know, in my time as a younger person, some of those people have been just executed. You know, what you see, people now know, I can do this, I can get away with it. If they take me to court, I can enter into a plea bargain. They take what they want to take. They give me what I continue to run on. You know, so these are issues which should agitate the rest of us. You know, we said earlier, let this system be merit-driven.
Yeah.
Let this system be talent-driven. When the late Prince Abubakar Odu, as governor of Kogi State in 1992, was appointing me Director of Information, taking me out of my job in Lagos, the Daily Times. He didn't ask, Tunde, are you Christian or Muslim? He thought I was doing well enough in my organization and I could add value to his job, so he brought me in. We have to get to that kind of country again. I go back to the last months of my youth corps, you know, which I had in Owerri. And I had this job interview which I went to attend in Ilorin, my old state, in the State Radio Corporation. And, you know, I ticked all the boxes. I think I scored 96%, so I led very clearly. But I remember that the chairman of the panel asked me, but are you a Christian or a Muslim? So I referred him. I said, my CV is before you, sir. I am Emmanuel Babatunde Olusunle. So my Emmanuelship failed me, and some other person, about number 6-7, who fitted their bill, made it. Wow. But I guess I'm happy I didn't go there anyway. Maybe I wouldn't be here with you in channels.
Well, the thing about all of this is that no matter what, you know, we or the leaders may seem to do, if we fail to have this conversation in this generation, the next will have it.
That's right.
So it will happen. It's just a matter of
it has to happen now.
It has to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, thank you for coming on this morning, Dr. Tunde Olusunle is a professor of creative writing, University of Abuja. Is also a former presidential aide and an author.
Thank you very much.